close our mini-series on Christianity and Adolf Hitler, we're going to take a diversion into a related argument that Hitler's hatred for Jews found its roots in the New Testament. Is the New Testament an anti-Semitic document? To be sure, many have twisted and abused it for that purpose, but do the texts themselves, when accurately contextualized, warrant such a conclusion? We'll start with a broad claim which appears several times in the New Testament, namely that Jewish persons were in some way responsible for the death of Jesus. This one is easy to deal with because of some simple facts about the nature of Roman administration. In the lands they conquered, the Romans left local administrations in place and used them as tools to do their bidding. Rome had final authority on certain cases, particularly involving capital offenses. But under normal circumstances, local officials were left with the responsibility to arrest, to try, to judge, and to punish offenders. In that light, there's nothing anti-Semitic about saying Jewish persons in the Sanhedrin were the decision-makers who sent Jesus to his death. If they were operating as was normal under Roman rule, of course they did. That was their duty as appointed by their Roman conquerors. Indeed, had the Gospels not depicted the participation of the Sanhedrin in the arrest, trial, judgment, and execution of Jesus, critics would accuse the Gospels of perpetuating a major historical inaccuracy, and they'd be right. Foremost among those passages said to be anti-Semitic are a collection found particularly in the Gospel of John that refer to the Jews in a way that sounds prejudicial to modern ears, as though it were a racial slur. Is this an accurate assessment, or are we perhaps reading modern disparaging usages into the New Testament? The most critical point in these is the actual meaning of the term which we translate Jews. Literally, the term should be rendered the Judeans, and to make this quite clear, it'll be the phrase I use for the rest of this vid. It means persons who reside in what was then the Roman province of Judea. Read this way, the phrase is no more of a slur than the Bostonians or the Cretans. But wasn't there religious connotation to the phrase too? Yes, there was, but only to the extent that the inhabitant of any particular area was assumed to be absolutely devoted to the gods of that area. A Roman would be expected to worship Roman gods, a Greek, Greek gods, and so on. There are also further complications related to the use of the phrase in John's Gospel, one that also solves a certain paradox. Most of the authors of the New Testament were themselves, by our reckoning, Jewish. Paul even called himself a Jew even as he was a Christian. So we might ask, how could they possibly be anti-Semitic if they were Jews? The answer lies in the phrase being better read as the Judeans. Paul's ancestry from Judea didn't change when he became a Christian, so he could still call himself a Jew or Judean even after conversion. Then in John we have passages like this one that seem blatantly anti-Semitic to us. But notice as well these other classifications used by John. The opposition here reflects a sort of religious rivalry in John's day between three parties. Both the Galileans and the Samaritans were regarded as insufficiently devoted to the God of Israel, while the Galileans and Samaritans had their own ideas about the insufficiencies of the Judeans. At the same time, there are clear indications that John uses the Judeans primarily to refer to the leadership of Judea as represented by the Sanhedrin or the Pharisees, in contrast to everyday residents of Judea. To this we can add a final point. The Jewish historian Josephus, who no one has ever accused of being anti-Semitic, regularly uses the phrase the Jews or Judeans, and he uses it in much the same way, absolutely or with modifiers which suggest a general reference in context, where the reference is clearly to a specific group of Jews. Perhaps the second most common passage alleged to be anti-Semitic is this one from Matthew, depicting a Jewish crowd declaring its indifference to its fate before Pilate. Some anti-Semites have taken this verse to mean that the Jewish people as a whole accepted blood guilt for the execution of Jesus, knowing he was innocent. But actually, the opposite meaning is true. Far from being a self-inflicted curse, what the crowd shouts is a strong statement of innocence. It appears in later Mishnaic form, where in capital cases the witness uses the invocation as a proof of his innocence. In context, if he is lying, the witness is willing to have the blood of the accused fall on himself and his offspring until the end of the world. The last passage we'll consider is this one, from 1 Thessalonians. Some commentators have found it so odd that Paul as a Judean said something like this that they've used it as a reason to propose that this passage is an interpolation. But here's the problem. Paul's comment here finds clear echoes from, and precedence in, a thoroughly Jewish source, what we call the Old Testament. And it's not hard to find other examples of what could be called internecine condemnation of the sort found in this passage. At a future date, we may fill in some other gaps in this story, such as anti-Semitism in the medieval period, which may also have informed and influenced Hitler. For now, this series has sufficiently established that the primary arguments used to associate Hitler's hatred with Christianity utterly fail.